NUPI, and CIPRI. On 29 June, we conducted the UN Peace Operation Hostage-Taking Crisis webinar. And today we'll be deliberating on the effectiveness of the UN peace operations, with particular focus on dynamics of composition of troops and diversity on UN peace operations. On conclusion of each webinar, we collect all the talks and print it as a monograph after due editing, so that we share the rich experience of our speakers with the larger audience and for cross-fertilization of ideas. I'm glad to inform you that our last webinar, which was on the hostage taking of peacekeepers, we have just published the monograph. My deep gratitude to General Dr. Badalai, Dr. Chiara Rufa, and Colonel Dr. Kekre Sharma and Colonel Kekre for accepting my request to share their rich experience and deep insight on the webinar today. They will be introduced by the moderator as we proceed further during the webinar. We are also fortunate to have galaxies of various UN professionals participating in the event today. My special thanks to Ms. Pernilla Ryden, Director, Challenges Forum, to accept our invitation to deliver the keynote address. Before I proceed further, a few words about the USI and the ICWA. USI is an autonomous body established in 1870. We are now 151 years old and the oldest think tank in the India. USI has played a clear role in the furtherance of India's UN peacekeeping endeavors. Indian Center for UN Peacekeeping was established and nurtured by the USI to become a regional center for the excellence in the UN peacekeeping capacity building and practicing UN diplomacy. Today, CNPK has grown to become a full-fledged unit of the Indian Army. Thus, for the last few years, USI is now focusing on the operational, strategic, and the policy issues related to UN peacekeeping. USI is also founding member of Challenges Forum and collaborate with NUPI and EPOL. And very recently, we have taken on one project from the EPOL. In past, USI conducted series of international courses in collaboration with UNITAR and recent path on protection of women in the conflict zone in collaboration with the UN Women. Indian Council of World Affairs, established in 1943, is the premium think tank of Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, with objective to create an Indian perspective of international relations and act as a repository of knowledge and thinking on the foreign policy issues. Now, let me briefly introduce Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, Director General ICWA, before I invite her for the opening talk. Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh is a career diplomat and had multilateral experiences during her service with the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. She was High Commissioner to Singapore and Ireland, and prior to that, Joint Secretary to President of India and Joint Secretary at the National Security Secretariat, National Security Council Secretariat. She was also our counselor in the permanent mission of India to United Nations in New York. She retired in September 2020 as Secretary, East Ministry of External Affairs. Now I request Mr. Vijay Thakur Singh for the opening remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the introduction, General Goswami, General B.K. Sharma, Director of USI, Pernilla Ryden, Director, Challenges Forum, and all the distinguished speakers and participants. Good morning to all in Europe, good afternoon to all in India, and if somebody has joined from the ROK, good evening to them. As already introduced, Indian Council for World Affairs is India's oldest foreign policy think tank, while USI is India's oldest think tank, particularly on military affairs. The two of us have collaborated to bring together a series of webinars on peacekeeping. Two of the webinars have already been held, and I'm extremely happy to be speaking at the third webinar, which is on the effectiveness of UN peace operations, dynamics of composition of troops and diversity on UN peace operations. Anybody who has served at the UN, and I have had the privilege of working at the Permanent Mission of India at the UN, all of us understand how important peacekeeping is as a very critical instrument for maintaining international peace and security. Countries have been contributing troops voluntarily for peacekeeping operations. India is proud that it has been one of the oldest contributors to peacekeeping operations. We have contributed more than 250,000 troops in 49 peacekeeping missions over the years, and cumulatively, it is the largest number of troop contribution from any country. This means that India has a vast repertoire of best practices in peacekeeping. And of course, USIS has also worked relentlessly and has contributed to peacekeeping understandings globally. Today also, India continues to provide eminent field commanders for the UN Peace Commission and has consistently been contributing troops. Since 1990, we are the 5th largest troop contributing country to the UN peacekeeping operations. Besides, more recently, in March this year, India contributed 200,000 COVID vaccines for UN peacekeeping personnel worldwide. All this shows the deep commitment India has to peacekeeping operations. This month, India is the president of the UN Security Council, and one of the main core issues identified during his presidency was peacekeeping. And under that initiative, on 18th of August, a high-level open debate was held in the UN Security Council. The theme was protecting the protectors, technology and peacekeeping. So the whole focus of this debate was largely on modern technological tools to enhance the safety and security of the peacekeepers, and also to aid the peacekeeping missions to implement their mandate effectively. The UN Security Council adopted a presidential statement on technology and peacekeeping, and it was the first such statement adopted by the UN Security Council on such a topic as technology and peacekeeping. And at the same time, another resolution was adopted by the UN Security Council, which was on accountability of crimes against peacekeepers. At this debate, at the high-level open debate, India's Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, announced the rollout of the Unite-Aware platform, and it was to be implemented across select peacekeeping missions in collaboration with the UN. This Unite-Aware platform is a situational awareness software program based on the expectation that an entire peacekeeping operation can be visualized, coordinated, and monitored on a real-time basis from the UN. We also signed an MOU, India and the UN also signed an MOU on training and capacity building of peacekeepers in the realm of technology. So peacekeeping occupies a very important, India as a major troop contributing country recognizes the importance of a continuous focus on peacekeeping operations. And the reason is also that today, peacekeeping is called upon not only to maintain peace and security, but also to facilitate political rights and restore law and order. Thus, in other words, today, the peacekeepers are performing a multi-dimensional role. But even as this transformation took place, the core values of UN peacekeeping, which are the principles of consent of parties, impartiality, and non-use of force, except in self-defense and defense of the mandate, have been held on to by the peacekeeping missions. And it is therefore the transition of the peacekeeping operations from truce supervision to multi-dimensional mandate has held on to core values, which is very good for peacekeepers. United Nations understood that there is a changed role for the UN peacekeeping operations. And there has always been a constant endeavor to work towards pragmatic approaches to ensure that peacekeeping operations continue to be effective and also address the 20th century challenges. The fundamental strength of peacekeeping operations is the presence of well-trained and well-equipped personnel. But that itself is not enough and cannot be effective enough unless the peacekeepers find acceptance in host countries. Peacekeepers' acceptance by host countries is crucial and is dependent on the host nation's perception of peacekeeping contingent, which the perception varies from contingent to contingent, how its socio-cultural background is, and the operational ethos of the peacekeepers. Hence, today's webinar will deliberate on the impact of the composition and diversity of peacekeepers drawn from different troop contributing countries, their varying socio-cultural characteristics and operational behavior patterns on the effectiveness of UN peacekeeping operations. The importance of these factors is very well known to the practitioners, but not that much discussed within academic circles. So such a discussion which is taking place today can contribute to an enhanced understanding of the issues involved on the part of researchers and thus enable a major troop contributing country like India to make intellectual contributions to enhancing the effectiveness of UN peacekeeping operations. I trust that the deliberations today will be very fruitful on this very important topic, and we look forward to the monogram coming out at the conclusion of this webinar. Thank you so much, General Goswami.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, for your opening remarks and setting the stage for the further discussion. Gentlemen, the challenges faced in the regional conflicts around the world during 1990s called for intensified efforts to analyze and reflect on the international community's role in this new context. In this environment, the Challenges Forum was launched in 1996, and USI is one of the founding members. Today, Challenges Forum is a global partnership of 24 countries and about 50 peace operations organizations. Challenges Forum is a strategic and dynamic platform for constructive dialogue and to bridge the divide between the policy and the operational level, to create shared understanding among UN and the regional organizations, member states, troops and police contributing countries, and the host countries. Gentlemen, we are fortunate to have with us Mrs. Pernilla Ryden, Director, Challenges Forum International Secretary. Let me introduce Pernilla before I invite her for the keynote address. Pernilla Ryden, Director, Challenges Forum International Secretariat, is a well-known UN professional with more than 20 years of experience in the different international settings, to include several UN peace operations in Africa and Middle East. Few names like Yemen, Congo, Iraq, Kosovo, Sudan, Liberia. Then she was with the EU Civil Crisis Management and the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe in Croatia. She has a number of publications and reports to her credit. So let's hear Ms. Pernilla Ryden on the effectiveness of UN peace operations. Over to you, Pernilla, please.
Distinguished generals, dear panel members, and highly regarded participant, it is a real honor and pleasure to be here with you today. I thank USI India and ICWH for organizing this event. USI, as General Goswami has said, is a long-standing, dedicated, and highly valued partner to the International Forum for Challenges of Peace Operation. I will not repeat what General Goswami has said about the Challenges Forum. I would just like to add that one of the strategic objectives for the Challenges Forum is to contribute to effective implementation and reform of international peace operations. The main tool of doing so is to engage and discuss with partners and stakeholders to generate new and innovative ideas. So before we take a launch to where we are today, let's take a quick look back. A lot has happened since the United Nations Security Council authorized the first UN peacekeeping mission, UNSO, in May 1948. This peace operation consisted of a limited number of military observers that was sent to monitor the implementation of a peace agreement between Israel and its Middle East neighbors. As many of you know, this peace operation is still in effect today. Until today, over 1 million women and men have served under the UN flag in more than 70 different peace operations. Since the Second World War, or since the Cold War, I should say, UN peacekeeping mission has become, as we have heard also here already, larger, more robust, and increasingly complex. This also spills over on the blue helmet that has become more diverse, both in terms of number of boots on the ground and countries participating in peace operations. If we take a stand today, 121 countries are contributing uniformed personnel to the 12 ongoing UN peacekeeping missions around the globe. For example, MINUSMA in Mali and UNMISS in South Sudan has peacekeepers from more than 40 different countries. The dilemma and challenges of UN peacekeeping in the 21st century are much larger than they were before. Mandates of peace operations has transformed from having a focus of monitoring peace agreement, as we learned from the first mission and so, into a much more active implementation and enforcement of peace agreements following conflict, including civil wars, which we can see in MONUSCO in the DRC Congo, or for example in UNMISS in South Sudan. We have to conclude that today, peacekeepers are increasingly being deployed where there might not be a peace to keep, where there might be a plethora of irregular armed groups, and where there might be terrorist threats. And all this with a mandate to protect civilians. Last year, the Challengers Forum hosted a webinar together with Dr. Chiara Ruffa and other scholars on the topic of improving peacekeeping effectiveness by increasing diversity of mission composition. And today's webinar, organized by you, shows the importance and timeliness of exploring the topic of what influences the effectiveness and success of peacekeeping further. I and my colleagues are very much looking forward to hear Chiara and the other scholars and participants elaborate on this issue later in the program. So allow me, therefore, at the outset to ask, based on the outcome of the previous seminar and heading towards the outcome of this seminar, to ask the question, what does diversity mean in terms of effectiveness of peacekeeping operations? Both research and practice shows that diversity among the blue helmets generally has a positive influence on the effectiveness of peacekeeping. Examples from several current UN missions suggest that cultural proximity, religious connection, and language skills are important to create a connection with the local population in the context where the blue helmets are serving. Just to take one example, when a Qatari contingency from Qatar joined an area under French operational control in Lebanon under UN UNIFIL flag, the civilian military coordination in this theater was enhanced considerably, and it was deemed to be due to their knowledge of the Arabic language and the Muslim identity. I believe this shows that there is a connection that could assist and enhance communication, and that slowly but surely, this could help making progress in terms of local conflict resolution. However, on a cautious note, these positive results will have to be weighted against possible negative side effects that could come from misunderstandings between contingency for different countries based on different social and cultural background, operational ethos, and a variety in national military doctrines. When blue helmets deploy in peacekeeping missions, They do carry with them the cultural and social heritage. By nature, military contingencies have history and are based on their needs, on the needs of their particular nation, with their own specific organization and system within their military. Both academic discourse and international policy shows, however, that diversity among the UN troops, as well as within the mission leadership, including the force commanders, in most cases increases peace operation effectiveness. Hence, I would like to conclude that the output and success of a UN mission increases considerably with the enhanced diversity. Reflecting on this, research also shows that it's important that the diversity is properly managed to, for example, minimize instances of coordination and challenges of misunderstanding that I mentioned before. We therefore believe that a structural work is required at the United Nations headquarters and mission level to really benefit from the diversity of peacekeeping troops. Given what I have said above, the following might serve as some food for thought for the further discussions today. I will outline a few issues that I've been thinking about. Having dynamic and ambitious peacekeepers engaged and aware of the positive effect of a diversity within the UN operation is crucial to improve mission effectiveness in the future. In this regard, peacekeepers might require a certain mindset that might be to some extent different from the mindset they have when they operate in a theater as soldier in their national environment. I believe, therefore, that it's important to make some joint efforts to help transforming national military continuity into a more multilateral mindset. So, to transform in a way how peacekeepers perceive and understand the operational environment where they are in. This could be done by more targeted training and exercise on mission realities, either before deploying or on the ground in the peacekeeping mission. In this way, UN has to ensure that the specific characteristic of troops are in line with the requirement of the mission and matching and targeted training for this purpose. As we also have heard earlier here today already, the developments are moving fast, and the use of new technology also makes it even more important to ensure that the deploying of national troops get properly trained before deployment. In general, peacekeepers need to become more adaptable in the modern world in order to work effectively and successful with a diverse set of troops in the theater of operation. So hence, more training in new advanced technology in addition to cultural and other understanding is needed. I also believe that more lessons could be learned from previous experience in the field, which, only taking one example, except the one of the Qatari contingents above, could be, for example, in UNMIL in Liberia, where there were Irish troops working under a Swedish command. So sometimes it could be a way forward to work together. In any case, I would conclude that within mission learning will also lead to positive results and subsequently enhance the peacekeeping performance. I believe that more could also be done at the UN headquarters level. The relevant departments such as the Fourth Generation Cell or the Light Coordination Mechanism, together with the Triangular Partnership, the so-called TPP, could, for example, establish a task force for diversity to explore common drivers and effectiveness in peacekeeping. It is believed that a different peace operations composition of troops might be a core factor for the successfulness of the mandate implementation. Based on research, a greater output could be achieved if there is larger effort to match certain troops' skills and qualifications with the mission's proximity of cultural and geographical areas. Another area that could be explored further is to develop or search for how diversity within mission leaderships might lead to greater legitimacy of a peace operation, both externally and internally. However, this said, geographical and other diversity might also bring potential challenges to the decision-making within a mission. Hence, how to enhance cohesion within and among mission leaderships need to be explored further by UN, both at headquarters and at the mission level, together with partners and troop contributing countries, as well as other senior official leadership appointments. And there will also be a need in this case to also work on modalities for different capacity building to maximize a multi-diverse mission leadership team. Finally, there is possibilities to also explore, as I mentioned briefly above, the possibilities of having different troops contribute, different troops contributing countries to train together, and in some cases also to co-deploy together within a specific mission area. I believe that this could be further explored and looked into, and be an option for those countries who choose this model for deploying troops. I thank you for your attention, and I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pernilla Ryden, for your pointed remarks and few questions on the inputs, which I'm sure speakers would have taken note of, and they will cover in some form or other during today's proceedings. Finally, gentlemen, let me introduce our moderator for the event, that is Major General Dr. A.K. Bordolai. General Bordolai is a distinguished fellow USI and Indian Army veteran. During his tour of duties, has held various assignments in the various interstate and intrastate conflicts. He was deployed in Sri Lanka also. He has drawn rich UN experience from his earlier assignments as a UN military observer in Angola, a research fellow on the UN peacekeeping with the United Service Institution of India, and also authored a book, UN Peacekeeping, Changing Security Scenarios, Its Implications for the UN Peacekeeping. He was also Deputy Head of Mission and Deputy Force Commander in the UNFIL in Lebanon, and later he commanded Indian Military Training Team in Bhutan. Post-retirement, he remains actively engaged with the peacekeeping organizations in India and abroad. General was awarded a doctorate recently by the Tilburg University of Netherlands for his thesis on the UN peace operation. To take the things further, now I call upon General Dr. Bordolai to start the proceeding. Over to you, sir. Over to you, General Bordolai.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, General Goswami. Thank you, Ambassador Thakur, Pernilla, and all participants. Now, all of you who have gone through the concept note and the flyer, they would have known why we wanted to have this discussion today. But those who joined in late possibly did not get time to go through it. I will just briefly touch upon the subject, not taking any time from the participants, of course. No, despite the long history of UN in peacekeeping operations, because of its past failure in places like Rwanda, Somalia, and Bosnia, the UN peacekeeping operations continue to come under criticism, more for what it could not achieve, but is less spoken about how it contributed towards the conflict management. That aside, there are enough reports and studies which has concluded that even peacekeeping operations have had a positive effect in conflict management. That apart, on its part, UN has tried to introduce several reforms to enhance the effectiveness of peace operations the past 30 years. Now, the meaning of effectiveness or success can be debated and could be hair splitting also. But as we understand, we'll talk of effectiveness, maybe interchange the word. Now, a peacekeeping operation could be effective or less effective because of number of reasons. And one of the factor which contributes towards the performance of peacekeeping operations is a diversity within the mission and outside, maybe. Like the keynote speakers has brought out that all contingents come with a lot of heritage and the positive effects. There are times, depends how you look at it. If you look at it as a heritage, it has got positive effect. If you look at it as the baggage, it will have a negative effect. So it is important for us to know. And this is the topic what we are going to discuss today. And we have got 3 participants, one academicians and practitioners, and 1 practitioner. Let me introduce to a 3 participant first before I go to the first one. First one is Dr. Chiara Rufa. As you know, she is the professor at Swedish Defense University and fellow at Uppsala University. Her contribution in the field, scholarly contribution in the field, not from sitting from the AC comfort, by field visit, is a tremendous contribution she has made. I have been actually personally benefited by her work. Just let me tell you, all those people who are interested, if you have not read these 2 books, you must go to it, apart from these articles I am saying. And another thing possibly you may not know, that apart from the extensive contributions she has made, recently, about a month back, she happened to be one of the examiners. And she has been very kind. At the cost of flattery, I'm making this statement. And maybe considering my age, she has been more than kind to me. Thank you so much, Dr. Rufa, to tell you publicly. And she is going to talk to us about the dynamics of composition of troops and diversity. A second speaker is Colonel Dr. Kekre Sharma. He is my former colleague while in uniform. And before he, on his own, after getting colonel's rank, he decided to pursue his academic interest, and he did his PhD from one of the university in Switzerland. He has been teaching in one of the universities in Chitkara University in Punjab for a long time. Now, he has been one of the biggest contributor as far as Indian peacekeeping operation is concerned. The institution what we boast of, the Center for United Nations Peacekeeping, I mean, invaluable contribution he has made. I must take a word. He's the one who single-handedly managed a lot of outdoor and indoor exercise. And for me personally, he is to be my remote friend and philosopher and guide. Any problem I used to come across peacekeeping, Kekre is to be my first stop. Thank you, Kekre. And third speaker is, of course, Colonel Kekre. I mean, he has had a distinguished career. He has held various important command and staff appointments in his time, some prestigious courses he attended. He has been a logistic officer and also the contingent commander, one of the current most complex peacekeeping operations, that is a DRC, MONUSCO. Now he has taken over the helm of responsibility of the Center for Peacekeeping Operation, and he will be able to give us insight from the practitioner's point of view, practically, how does the diversity impact on the performance on effectiveness of the peacekeeping operations. With this, I request Dr. Rufa to begin her presentation.
Thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon. I should say good afternoon first and good morning to each and all of you. I'm truly delighted and honored to have the opportunity to present to you today. Thank you so much to the United Service Institution of India and the Indian Council for World Affairs for the very kind invitation, and in particular to Ambassador Thakur, Major General Goswami, and Dr. Bardalai. Dr. Bardalai, many thanks for the very flattering and kind words, and I very much looking forward to any feedback, any reaction you might have. And I look forward to the Q&A later. For now, I would like to tell you a bit more about my own research about diversity in peacekeeping missions, and particularly its connection with effectiveness and peacekeeping effectiveness. But as requested by Dr. Bardalai, I would also like to tell you a little bit more about military cultures and why they matter when we talk about peacekeeping effectiveness. So my presentation will really be made up of two parts. In the first part, I'm just going to introduce you to the reasoning that we have in our book Composing Peace, which is co-authored with my colleagues Andrea Ruggeri and Vincenzo Bove. I'll tell you a little bit more about what it means to study diversity and how we went about to do it. And then I'll dive in basically, and I'll tell you a bit more about the research that I've done about military cultures in peacekeeping mission, focusing in particular on the United Nations mission in Lebanon. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let me just get started with three basic facts about peacekeeping. So as Pernilla already mentioned, and a few others, UN peacekeeping has really changed over the past 20 years very dramatically. And we can see at least three broader trends, which I would like to go a little bit more into detail in, because they're really helpful when we think about these connections between diversity and peacekeeping effectiveness. Over the past 20 to 30 years, we see three main changes. The first one that you can see here in the slide has been this very dramatic increase in the number of peacekeeping troops deployed. As you can see in this graph, uniformed UN peacekeeping personnel increased quite a lot, both in terms of number of peacekeepers deployed, as you can see from the line, and there has been also an increase in the number of countries supplying peacekeepers, as you can see in the bin. To illustrate, the UN went from 11,000 peacekeepers deployed globally in 1989 to a little above 90,000 as of August 2018, and peaked in 2015 with a little over 100,000 peacekeepers. Also, in terms of countries providing peacekeepers, we went from 46 in 1990 to 124 in August 2018. Next slide, please. The second big transformation, which is really important for my talk today, has to do with the fact that not only we have seen a dramatic increase in the average numbers of troop contributing countries per mission, but also in their composition. If you compare these two graphs, it is apparent that something happened between the one on the left-hand side of the slide and the one on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we have the top troop contributors in 1990, with, as you can see, Canada, Finland, and Austria as top three, while on the right-hand side, we have the top troop contributors in 2017, with Ethiopia, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan as top contributors. And India continues to be really one of the top contributors. Notwithstanding a number of changes, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan continue to really rank very high in the ranking of top contributing countries. This also applies to other kinds of contribution, not only the number of troops at a tactical operational level, but also when it comes to force commanders. We went from 157 commanders from 50 nations, we now have 97 SRSGs from 50 nations. Both numbers are huge increases in comparison to numbers that we have from just 20 to 30 years ago. Next slide, please. And the third and final fact that I would like to mention about transformations in UN peacekeeping has to do with an increase in the average number of troops per mission, as you can see in this graph from 2010. Can you perhaps go back? Thank you. The graph is not particularly detailed, but it gives you an intuition about how much diversity there is in each mission. So this means that the average number of countries in a UN African peacekeeping mission, for instance, in mid-90s, there were 8 troop contributing countries in a UN African peacekeeping mission on average, but by mid-2000, we had 21 troop contributing countries. Just to illustrate, as of today, the UN mission in Mali has 56 troop contributing countries. So, the missions not only have become bigger, the kinds of contributors have changed, but also each single mission has a lot of troop contributing countries. In the past 30 years, United Nations peacekeeping peacekeeping missions have changed dramatically and have become much more diverse, which leads us to the following research question. Please, next slide. Does diversity of mission composition matter when, can you please go back? Does diversity of mission composition matter for peacekeeping effectiveness? And so this is really the core question that we ask in this book, Composing Peace. Next slide, please. How do we go about answering that question? Well, we work quite a lot in trying to figure out what we mean by diversity of mission composition, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a sec. Then I should mention briefly the 4 dimensions of mission composition we focus on, and I'll delve into military culture, so I'll only focus on one of the 4 dimensions that we focus on for time constraints. Then I'll tell you just very briefly how we went about to answer the question that we asked, and I'll tell you, I'll really spend most of my time talking about the core findings that we have. Next slide, please. So what do we mean by diversity of mission composition in a peacekeeping mission? So I would like to be very clear on the fact that we don't really study gender diversity nor police diversity. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you really have the things that we do not really focus on. But on the right-hand side, we tell you a bit more about what it is that we do study. So we study diversity in terms of national origins of 4 components of mission composition. This means that we really only focused on geographic.
Chiara, you put your video off.
Are field diversity, top leadership diversity, vertical leadership distance, and horizontal distance. So we basically had to find a way, right, to study this diversity. And the way we did it was to, first of all, focus on the diversity among troops deployed on the ground as troop contributing countries. Our second, so it really is about the diversity among the blue helmets deployed. Where do the blue helmets come from? Does the mission consist of soldiers from 2 countries or from a multitude of countries? The second important dimension that we focus on of mission composition has to do with top leadership diversity. That is the diversity between the position of force commanders and the special representative of the Secretary General. For instance, is the force commander Swedish and the SRSG is Indian, or perhaps the other way around? And what does it mean in terms of then subsequent effect on peacekeeping effectiveness? Our third out of 4 dimension of mission composition has to do with vertical leadership distance, which is the diversity between the force commander and the peacekeepers deployed. So, for instance, does the force commander lead blue helmets of his own nationality, or blue helmets from culturally, economically, or linguistically distant countries? For instance, what does it mean for an Indian force commander to have a wealth of different countries to command? And conversely, what does it mean for an Indian force commander to have a peacekeeping force that is mainly composed of Indian peacekeepers? Does it make a difference or not? These are the kinds of questions that we ask. Next slide, please, but perhaps it's not working anymore, in which case I'll just keep going. So thank you. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about how we went about to deal with these questions. So it's, as you can see, it's a pretty complex setup with these 4 dimensions. But for the sake of this presentation today, I only focus on field diversity. That is the first dimension that we focus on, and then I really delve a little bit deeper into it. But first, I would like to tell you a bit more about how we went about it. So for the book that you can see, the blue book, the Composing Peace book, we really combine quantitative and qualitative strategies of data collections. And in order to do that, we basically combined, we exploited and used panel Uppsala conflict data data, and in terms of quantitatively, in terms of variables for measuring diversity, we created some indexes. So we really did this quantitatively. But we combined this with a very in-depth exploration on 3 different cases. So we looked into UNIFIL 2, United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, that Dr. Bardolai knows very well, and he's even written a PhD on it. And then we worked on MINUSMA and on MINUSCA. And the interesting thing is that these are UNIFIL, MINUSMA, and MINUSCA. MINUSMA in Mali and MINUSCA in the Central African Republic are 3 very different kinds of peacekeeping mission that would really allow us to see what kind of diversity and what kind of effects does diversity have. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we find, just if we talk only about diversity, so diversity among the blue helmets deployed, we find that high levels of field diversity trigger processes whereby complementarity of skills is valued and help at creating trust and willingness to share key. Can you go back to the findings, please? Next slide. Thank you. The slide about the findings where we could read more about the findings. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. Yes, exactly, that slide. Thank you. So, and high levels of field diversity help signaling the UN commitment to help solve the conflict. Thereby, it seems to also have a deterrent effect. And I think this is very new and very important, because what we seem to see in the literature, but also in a lot of policy work, is this assumption that only the presence matters in a very muscular way. So only the mere presence is what has an effect. But what we seem to find is the presence of a diverse set of blue helmets seems to have launch a kind of signaling effect, which is much more than muscular deterrence and much more than about mere presence of peacekeeping troops. Our qualitative evidence, as I said, on these 3 different cases also suggests that high levels of field diversity may trigger coordination problems and misunderstanding, as well as separate clubs. But overall, field diversity is associated with higher peacekeeping effectiveness. Let me now move on and tell you a bit more and delve a little bit deeper into this issue of field diversity. How can we think about this? Can you please, next slide, please? From the military studies literature, we have a growing but still limited scholarly literature that is suggesting implicitly that different militaries have different operational styles. And we have a recurring anecdotal evidence from both UN peacekeeping and also NATO operation that confirms such observation. So in my other work, in my own book about military cultures, I really, which appeared a few years before composing Peace, I basically ask a question: why do some armies in peacekeeping mission emphasize their military posture, while others emphasize their humanitarian posture, while deployed in peace and stability operation under similar constraints? And the argument I made back then in that book was about how military culture influences the way in which different armies behave in operations. So the point here is really that diversity comes with different troop deployed with very different operational style and very different military cultures, and the way in which these military cultures help shaping the way in which peacekeepers behave is very important, particularly when we have to think about several different troop contributing countries deployed. So in my own work, I've delved very deeply into a set of into slightly distinct material, and it's a much more qualitative work. But basically, what I've done has been to spend several months deployed with several different peacekeeping troops in the United Nations mission in Lebanon, and also with several troops deployed in the NATO mission in Afghanistan. That was not really UN peacekeeping, but it was more a stabilization operation with a counterinsurgency twist. I'm not going to talk about the NATO mission now, but I'll just stick to the UNIFIL work, but I'm more than happy to answer any question you may have on that. So through in-depth qualitative interviews, semi-structured questionnaire, participant observation, I've really delved into these cases. And what I find is quite interesting. I basically find that the way in which each single peacekeeping troops interpret its mandate is very much a function of the pre-existing military culture. So I've delved in particular on French, Italian, Korean, and Ghanaian units deployed in the United Nations mission in Lebanon. And I found that, for instance, in the French case, the core characteristics of the French military culture is contained assertiveness. And this way of behaving really shaped the way in which they interpreted the mandate. By contrast, the Italian military culture was very much based on the idea and this push of being perceived as good humanitarian soldiers. And that has really, and that it was really about a fusion between long ingrained ideas of Italian soldiers as good people and the need to reacquire a lost legitimacy from the events that had happened during World War II. So this made then Italian soldiers behave in a completely different way from the French. They were much more keen in doing civic projects and much less keen in doing patrols, for instance. And they did it, and they behaved very much accordingly. So what I seem to find is that the Italian military culture is very coherent with the Italian soldiers' perceptions, the way they understand the mission, the UN mission, as a traditional peacekeeping mission. By contrast, the French military culture is coherent with French soldiers' perception, whereby the mission was perceived and understood to be as a peace support operation. So this really has affected very profoundly how Italian and French soldiers behaved. The French soldiers did 27 patrols a day on average, while the Italians did only 15. The timing of patrols was completely different, with French mainly patrolling at night and the Italians mainly patrolling during the day. The level of armament was also very different, where the French used very heavy and noisy tanks, while the Italians only used light armored vehicles. So in terms of variations in force employment, we find a very big variation between Italian and French soldiers, but I would say we find a very distinctive variation also between Korean and Ghanaian soldiers and Italian and Korean soldiers. For instance, Korean peacekeepers were very risk adverse at the time of observation, while the Ghanaian, because they had been there for such a long time, like the Indian troops already during the UNIFIL 1 mission, they had a very close connections and very good sources for collecting and gathering information in comparison to, for instance, the French or the Korean peacekeepers. So taken together, this finding is really important when we think about diversity, because there are very distinct ways of going about when implementing the mandate. So while in my particular work, while Italian soldiers prioritize interaction with the local population and aid projects, French did much more patrolling and displayed higher force protection measures. And this was in line with situational perceptions of French and Italian contingents deployed and the respective French and Italian military cultures. So this leads me to just draw some conclusions, just bringing together, the first part of my talk that was about diversity and its connection with peacekeeping effectiveness, and the second part of my talk that was more about military cultures. How can we reconcile somehow these two pieces of findings? On the one hand, the fact that military cultures are really important and drive how peacekeeping, the same peacekeeping mandate will be interpreted and understood. And on the other hand, once we know that, and there are a lot of diverse forces deployed, then what do we do with it, right? I mean, how can we go about to affect peacekeeping effectiveness? So wrapping up, it seems that diversity of a UN mission UN mission composition is really important. It is definitely an asset and not necessarily a limitation. And when an asset, diversity signals commitment of the United Nations and allows for complementarity of skills. But when diversity should be managed, because perhaps military cultures produce outcomes that are just fundamentally different, right? Just imagine, on the one hand, French peacekeepers, and on the other hand, Italian peacekeepers or Ghanaian peacekeepers. So when diversity should be managed to attain it, because it creates coordination cost, this management should strive to minimize conditions whereby diversity prompts instances of coordination problems and misunderstanding. So I would just like to say it very clearly, this diversity, the fact that these different troop contributing countries are doing things different is actually an asset, but being more aware of these differences is something that we should definitely work harder for, as you know, as we work across troop contributing countries. So I think I would just like to, at the mission level, there are a number of policy recommendations that emerge. So definitely at the mission level, we should further explore the positive effects of diversity in terms of signaling the commitment of the United Nations, in terms of complementarity of skills that really arise from, you know, having just different troops that have different skills and that have different languages that that can perhaps, you know, some like the Qatari example that Pernilla gave, you know, some troop contributing countries that can just be a little bit better at communicating with the locals, for instance. So we should definitely exploit much more the positive effects of diversity and reduce the negative effects of diversity by enhancing mission learning. And as I said, just becoming more aware of the potential variation in terms of military cultures and the potential negative effects of diversity. Just if I may just take one more slide to conclude. In terms of policy recommendations at the troop contributing countries level, which I think is really important to discuss in this kind of setting, I think we should work harder to make military organizations better able to work in multinational contexts and more keen to acknowledge the positive effects of diversity and learn from others. Second, this should be done by including multinational coordination explicitly and systematically in training templates, much more than it is done now at the UN level. We should also work hard for a shift in mindset whereby peacekeepers see diversity as beneficial and not as controversial. And then, you know, just also number of troops and technology are one, but not the only relevant factors to consider when looking to improve military operations. In recent years in UN peacekeeping, if we think of MINUSMA in Mali, for instance, there's been a lot of emphasis into these high-tech institutions like ASIFU, other intelligence gathering agencies attached to the mission. But what we really need are soft skills, our ideational skills, our ability to work with each other, ability to understand the needs of the population. And then fifth and lastly, cultural variations are likely not only to, are therefore likely to impact not only the effectiveness of mandate implementations, but also the ability of different contingents to work together. So we need to work harder to create, contexts and venues that allow for a lot more sort of interaction between different troop contributing countries. So right now, we're still working pretty much with a one mission, one nation, one area of operation, one AOR, and one country kind of setup. But I think, and that works well when it comes to complementarity of skills, if one is aware of what a single troop contributing country brings to the table, brings to each area of operation. But I think we should also think perhaps a bit more creatively about how to deal with this and how to perhaps combine even very different troop contributing countries to attain a more desirable effect. Thank you so very much for your attention, and I look forward to any question any comment you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Rufa. This is an excellent presentation. I know you have got so much to say, but 20 minutes is very less. I think you need minimum 1 hour's time. But you have been able to give us a good insight to these dynamics of the diversity and the impact of the cultural behaviors of the peacekeeping troops. And I'm sure that all those who are listening to it have got a lot of questions they may have in their mind. And very correctly, you brought out one thing, that in spite of being have the diverse force composition, which is actually not in our hand, we cannot do anything about that. How to make best use of it, look at positively. And it depends on the leadership's creativity quality, I would say. And also you made a point about that how the different contingents with diverse cultural traditions and heritage they can combine. I am privy to it. I remember once how an Italian company is from the Western world got they participate in peacekeeping operations with an Indonesian battalion. I mean, initially, a lot of there were inhibitions that they will be able to function or not. But I have seen myself, by the time the Italian contingent left after 6 months, I could see tears in their eyes. They are unbelievable. But again, it depends on finally boils down to the leadership quality. So I have got one question. You may think about it. Maybe question answer session we can take it. You mentioned somewhere, I read it, that about diversity. You said the distances. And you said that there are times when the generally distances are less, it is easier, but also distances are more, then also could be difficult. But one place you mentioned, and some of the European contingents, they're slightly more distance from these host nations or the population. And you said that one hand, in another example, you said when the distance is closer, for example, director of Challenger Forum also brought out about this, how this Qatari was, because they were closer. They could easily, amalgamate with they acceptable. They found it better acceptability. And this reference to the European contingent, because of they do not share the same language, the religions and traditions and all, the distance is obviously more. But you brought out in your writing that maybe there's a positive effect. You said there, why it is? Is it because of the very formal, because of the formality, they give the signal that we make business, or something else? So I leave it that question. You may like to throw some more light during the question answer session. And now we go to Colonel Dr. Kekre Sharma. He will talk to us from the point of view of both academician and practitioners. Floor is yours, Kekre.
Thank you very much, sir, and good day to everybody. I think I will take off from where Professor Rufa has left, and partly Jan Badalai has also spoken about it. So I'm going to deep dive into the cultural aspects. I know that I'm going to tread on eggshells. There can be controversies, but let me look at the values, culture, diversity, and correlate it to the mission area and mission being effective. So the perspective is totally different, and I'm purely looking at it from Indian perspective. At the end of it, I would like to relate it to some of the Indian experiences. But before I start, I must thank Indian Council of World Affairs and USI of India for giving this opportunity to be able to share my views on effectiveness of UN peace operations, primarily focusing on diversity. I will start with a very small example. Probably I'll be able to relate it later. 30 years back, when we were in the peacekeeping mission in Cambodia, I was in the sector monitoring team, operational officer, and we had 14 military observers team. We were coordinating with them, and come December 1992, when Khmer Rouge reneged on their consent plea, and they started opposing the elections. And there were a lot of people getting, being detained by the Khmer Rouge in various hideouts. So I got a call from the force headquarters, and I was told that you please convey this to all the teams that whenever they are going out on patrolling or any liaison visit, there should be a mixed team. That means there should be an Asian or African military observer and somebody from the West. It came as a surprise, and I kept on wondering about this. Later on, when I did a little deep dive onto the statistics, sure enough, the Khmer Rouge had detained those teams where it was not a mixed composition. No, this obviously has some relevance to what we are talking about today. I also came across this particular Nation News article just last week only, or a couple of weeks back, and this has been debated many times, and obviously, like Jan Badrai said, that people discuss UN and UN peacekeeping more for what they have not been able to achieve, and less for what they have already achieved. But the fact remains that besides Bosnia, Somalia, and Rwanda, uh, we had Syria and Yemen, which is still going on, Sahel, Mali, North Mozambique, and Afghanistan. I don't have to say anything. So the article in this definitely says that the kind of factors which were existing erstwhile, even after Cold War finished, on the kind of actions which were existing, you try and negotiate with Taliban as on today. So those factors do not exist. No, this is not the part of the topic, but I just thought I'll bring it out. Another is a debating point that why is the West so reluctant to send peacekeeping contingents to the mission areas? And there was Rudyard Kipling, who was born in India in Mumbai. He gave in 1899 a poem called The White Man's Burden, right? Now, the last two lines of this poem, this small poetic narration, your new thought, sullen people, half devil and half child. Now, this was addressed. This is actually it captures the mood of Victorian era, and it was addressed to the British Empire, and he was actually telling them that please go and you got to civilize these people. So that's how the white man's burden was seen. But the retort came from Ashcroft when he wrote in the Empire Writes Back, and this is the fact, relevant to our topic, that 75% of the people living in this world have had their lives shared and shaped by the experiences of colonialism, which essentially was divide and rule, and which actually, looked at various ethnic groups and tried to keep them separate. Now, it is those ethnic groups who are asserting today and trying to gain independence, and that's where the conflict lies. Now, let us look at the realistic part of it. This is a 31st July 2021 data. 42% of the peacekeepers being provided in the mission area are from top 5 countries, which are developing countries. Now compare this to just about 5% contribution from the Western world. Now, many researchers have written the reasons and possible reasons, which I just called out, was that there is no much of incentive. I think the major reason is that being democratic country, they have an issue where public opinion may turn very much against sending peacekeepers if there is a casualty, as it happened in Somalia and long way back in Vietnam, and is happening today in USA. No direct national interest. I think Joe Biden was very clear when he said that what are we doing here in Afghanistan? And the last one, I think Western nations really do not feel very comfortable while working under UN command for whatever reason. But the question now coming up is that now that Western nations have exited from Afghanistan and also from Iraq, will they come back to the UN PPOs? Maybe, because French are already there in Sahel, Mali. UK is also moving in, so maybe that some changes will be seen. But going back to the diversity of cultures, I think it is the maybe that it was a colonial period that a lot of authors started writing about it, and from clash between civilization, ultimately the famous book in 1996 came in, where Huntington was talking about civilizations divide in his book, The Clash of Civilization. But the final nail was in 2016, where the President Donald Trump stated, he stated many things, but finally these 5 words: I think Islam hates us. And as they say, after this statement, the rest is the history. Now, the diversity is always there. And like Rufa very rightly said, that the military culture is also, ultimately shaped by the domestic culture or culture from where you are coming in. And whether it's a Confucius-driven or Vedic Chanakya-driven or Aristotle-driven, there are differences, and these differences are pronounced and are visible not only in the forces which are operating there, but also the society where these forces are going. So it depends on how these forces are able to connect with them. Western ethics is primarily a rational, individualistic, individual autonomy is primary. Eastern ethics, and when I say Eastern, I am also including African, also Islamic world, Confucius. I think society and the family is important. Religious teachings are important, versus rational thought. Group harmony is important. So these ethics and these values are deeply embedded, whether we are soldiers or not. But the fact remains that we carry these when we go to a mission area. The stumbling blocks come, or the major problem comes when there are certain assumptions. Assumption like everybody is same, which is not true, right? Or language is just whatever you speak, which is also not true, because there are written records when Americans were in Iraq. They were signaling Iraqis to stop in a particular way, and Iraqis were thinking that they were telling them to go through, which ended up with a lot of shooting. So the language of non-verbal communication is, as we know, it's almost 80%. Only 20% is verbal. Then stereotypes. We all have tendency to evaluate each other, and in the mission area, when you are working, I've had the privilege of working with 31 nationalities in my 1.5-year tenure, and you always have, there's a tendency that you are evaluating others for whatever reason. So the last one, which I think is very important, we always keep seeing, and I taught our peacekeepers and international peacekeepers for almost 7-8 years in the Center for UN Peacekeeping, and we always used to say that it is the locals who will make you feel safe. It is your ability to persuade them. You have to tell them that you are committed, you are for them. You don't have any ego. You got to keep the egos of the locals. So, that is how you create that credible deterrence against any problem which will come. Now, troop numbers also matter. Many times we gloss over it, but the fact remains that, like Rupa showed a slide, that I think highest number was just crossed 1 lakh in 2015. Otherwise, it has been around 90,000. That's a maximum. And the largest UN mission had 22,000 troops in 2013, exactly at the same time when ISAF had 1 lakh military personnel in Afghanistan. One single mission. Yes, it was enforcement, it was whatever name you give. But what happened in Afghanistan, I don't have to describe that. And the fact remains that in Congo, those 22,000 troops or those brigades in North Kivu and South Kivu were still able to, neutralize M23 and many such factions. May not be fully, but they were successful. Now, 121 countries. In fact, there are 66,000 uniformed personnel from 87 nations. So that is the kind of diversity we are looking in the mission area, right? Now, I'm looking at a different angle. I know it's a controversial. I wonder if it's a work in progress. Probably we'll have to deep dive into it. Are we looking at the ethnicities of the country and then looking at the ethnicities of the troops? There is very interesting corollary to this or correlation to this, and I'm sure some researchers would find it very interesting. Does that help? Will that be enhancing the ethnicity, the effectiveness of peacekeeping mission? So when we look at the contributing countries, no, I'm not talking about I'm just calling out Muslim troops or troops who are following Islam as a religion and trying to relate it to the countries where the missions are being launched. Now, imagine in a village where there's a mosque and you have Muslim troops there is much more cohesion in, I think, thought process and talking to each other than if somebody is from a different ethnicity. So it is just one of the wider thought. Maybe that this also has to be looked into when we are talking about diversity and uh, and the diversity in the mission area, and then seeing what is more effective. So the question is, of course, do culture, religious proximities between peacekeepers and the local populations bring in more effectiveness? Now, German Center for International Peace Operation had studied regional diversity in 2012, rise of the rest versus decline of the West, and did talk about regional solutions for regional problems. Now, Africa has been seeing some examples. Darfur is one. In fact, North Mozambique has recently seen a regional force being used, and hopefully they have been able to recapture the area, the port area, and all. So this is also one thought process which carries on because the regional troops are very close to the conflict area and the language and the ethnicity. Coming back to, I have read part of this book, Rupa, and it's wonderfully written. The very fact that you have picked up examples of Lebanon, Mali, and Central African Republic, it is beautifully organized, both qualitative and quantitative, and the relationship and all those different kind of distances which you are mentioning. I think most of it I would agree, and it's worth noting down and maybe moving it forward with some other missions. So it relates to what I also keep reading, and I'm thankful to Jan Bardalai to link your writing and your articles back to me. And because when he was doing his own PhD, somehow he referred to all these, and I was able to go through this. But I'm very impressed with this report. I keep talking about last time also. I did mention about this December 17th report of Giancarlo's improving security of United Nations peacekeepers. And there are a lot of things. Last time we had discussed this, but one of the quote is that leadership must be able to build and sustain credibility to gain respect. The strength is not only in weapon system. Strength is your leadership and your ability to connect with the locals. That's extremely important, I personally feel. Now, I'll narrate some experiences in the next 5-6 minutes. That's the time I have got. I've taken a random shots at this. Neutral Nations Repatriation Commission was established after Korea War ended, and they were prisoners of war, which were being held in various camps from South Korea as well as from North Korea and China. Large number from North Korea and China, of course. John Thimaya was the chairman, and Major General Thorat was the commander of custodian force. Many incidents happened in that camp, but one of the incidents I would just like to describe, which actually shows how culture affects us. There was this camp with 200 Chinese soldiers. One of the soldiers, the task of the commission was to ascertain who wants to go back to their own country and who wants to stay put in South Korea. Majority of them obviously wanted to stay put in South Korea, but there was this one sergeant of China who said that he wants to go back, want to be repatriated, which created a lot of chaos in the camp, and they were agitating, they were throwing stones. And General Thorat, along with 3 officers and about 8-10 men, he walked into the camp and he wanted to negotiate. But they were very adamant. And as they were walking back, one of the officers who was with General, actually he was the translator or interpreter, he was dragged back into the camp, Major Grewal, and when this was seen, General Thorat with his small group again went back, and he went into the camp, and they were actually surrounding him. By the time, obviously, the other forces had surrounded the camp, but Thorat said, "No one will fire. We will not use force." And after a while, after about half an hour of negotiation, this is what General Thorat mentioned to them through interpreter. "What sort of Chinese are you? I and my men have been your guests for almost an hour, but you have not seen it fit to offer a cup of tea or a glass of water. Where is your traditional hospitality? And where are your good manners for which your race is so proud of? Just these words. And the presence of mind of a custodian force commander. And suddenly the Chinese just, that entire anger melted, and out came glasses of water and a cup of tea, and everything was, negotiated. So this is where the tradition, this is where your values and culture comes in. Everything can't be solved through force. We had almost 17 battalions in Gaza, and every battalion connected with the locals so much that they used to be received. They used to be they actually saved a lot of their Western counterparts. I mean, some of the accidents, I read that one of the accidents where 2 Canadians were held up by those guys, but they were rescued from there just by talking to the people. One Assam and 4 Jackrafe and Cambodia did. Look, by that time, we had started doing a lot of civic actions or humanitarian actions. Wherever you are, as a tradition, Indian Army units, wherever they are, they will adopt a school around, they will adopt a village, they will do a lot of humanitarian action, whether you call it winning the heart and mind of people, whether it's civic action or whatever name one gives. Our brigade group in Somalia, I mean, we always kept on discussing that with under Brigadier Mono Bhagat in Bedoa, Beledogla, as well as in Kismayu, we were dealing with 2 warlords, Farah Muhammad Aidi and Morgan. And both of them were pacified. There was so much of support. This is the place where Indian troops or Indian composition, both Ministry of External Affairs and our armament quarter thought it fit that we should send a veterinary team with our mission, because ultimately these missions are in a very rural area in Africa or wherever it is, and they have the animals and cattle and all, and that was a huge success. So similarly in Ethiopia, Eritrea, we made a bridge. Our troops dug wells. In UNIFIL itself, the mission which you have studied, Dr. Rufa, when Israelis went through in 2006 into Lebanon, 4 Sikh battalions stayed put there, and only thing they did was looked after the civilians who were around the blue line. And there are some great monuments of that, that being there and looking after the civilians, because they said, okay, we are here, let us, do something for the people who are here. Monuk brigade activities are well recorded, so I'm not going to dwell into this. In the North Kivu, they have done wonderful jobs. Now, the last point which I want to just narrate, it's a very small incident. I started with Korea. Now this battalion, our Gurkha Rifles, was there in 94, 95, and it was immediately after the massacre which took place between Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda. And there was this isolated post, and when this battalion de-inducted, we spoke with the CEO of the battalion, and he says that this small post, 30 men, in a very isolated area, were suddenly surrounded by about 70, 80 RPF soldiers. And 8, 10 of them walked into the compound, and they were demanding the weapon system, and they were saying that you go away from here. Now, sometimes not knowing the language also helps. Now, the Gurkhas just didn't understand what the hell were they talking. So the sergeant major or JCO was there. He simply said, okay, there are some guests who have come. So he asked his soldiers to come, bring some glasses of water. So out came a tray full of 8, 10 glasses of water, which was offered to these chaps who were actually threatening. And the conversation continued, which no one was understanding. And after another 5 minutes, 8, 10 cups of tea came out. So the RPF guys probably got so frustrated that he walked away from there. Now this is in a lighter way, but the fact remains that how we connect with the civilian populace is very, very essential and very important for whosoever is operating in a mission area, because we keep telling our peacekeepers that you are there for them. You are not there for yourself. And ultimately, the entire peacekeeping mission is for the civilian population there, not for the faction leaders. So if that is driven home, I personally feel that effective. So you can see this picture which is there. It's a very classical picture, and I worked with a contingent way back. I used to wonder why these soldiers have their even grenades hanging outside their uniform, and they have heavy weapons. And here is another soldier, Indian peacekeeper, blue turban, standing with his weapon. But I think who is going to be more threatening to anybody, the civilian as well as the factions? I will leave it to your imagination. I agree that it's not a job for the faint-hearted, which Hazel had said. I always add that it is also a job for the kind-hearted people who go in a peacekeeping mission. So thank you very much. I think I have finished my 20 minutes. Sorry if I have overshot by a couple of minutes. And if you have any questions, we'll take it on.
Thank you, Colonel Kekre. Yes, he overshot by 2 minutes, but I grant you that much because the excellent presentation coming from the field and academicians. Your views are pretty much in line with what Dr. Rufa has brought out, and he brought out some very, very important issues. And one I would like to highlight here, of course, that what you said that ultimately when peacekeepers get deployed, why do they get deployed? They don't get deployed to build buildings, a school, bridges and all. Those are subsidiary things, basically to go there to save human lives. So anything we do about it, it must affect them. Therefore, if you can strike a rapport with them, if they're satisfied, I think possibly one can say that peacekeeping has done a job or quite effective. And that is actually not to say the center of gravity lies in the population, host country's population. Next point you brought out about the ethnicity. Yes, I mean, ethnicity, yes, but that is one of the diversity, but depends how you relate to the ethnic background. You also talked about these people, some people say that Africa is the problem can be solved by the Africans. There are missions, I think it came out in one of the conclusion of Dr. Rufa. Please correct me if I am wrong, that I think MINUSCA, it is most of the people contingent from the African nation, yet they do not find good acceptable. So it depends, because we cannot look at one aspect. We have to look at as a cumulative effect of how these are being looked into. I think the balance will be required. Then you also talked of credibility and legitimacy. Yes, this incidentally, the credibility and local legitimacy, the second condition for to be a successful peacekeeping operations. For instance, Director Challenger from brought out, and you also brought out, the Qatari contingent when they came in, they had that legitimate, that inherent legitimacy being from a particular religion. So they can, mix well with the people. But that will not give them the guarantee unless they prove them creditable. So they have to earn their credibility constantly. So just because the peacekeeping mission has been deployed, we have this got legitimacy because it is approved by the Security Council, obviously, and most of the contingents are big nations have agreed to participate. They have the legitimacy. But once they come to the mission area, they have to come up to the expectation of the local population. Unless they come to the expectation of the local population, where the center of gravity lies, legitimate or no legitimacy, they'll be seen as a non-effective peacekeeping operation. For instance, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, they were very legitimate, but to the poor Bosnian Muslim, these are illegitimate operations, they're quite ineffective. Anyway, I'll not dwell in it more. I will go to Colonel Kekre. Kekre, now we are waiting to hear from you the practitioner perspective, actual example from the ground, how you think that the diversity can affect. We'll be very happy if you can let us know give us about 2-3 concrete examples. We'll be very glad. Up to you, Colonel Kekre.
Thank you very much, General Bordele. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Colonel Kaustubh Kekre. I am the Colonel Center for UN Peacekeeping at New Delhi, India. And I'm indeed honored to be a panelist on this distinguished panel. I have the privilege of being the last speaker today, and many issues have been touched upon by Rufa and Colonel Kekre. But I shall try and share my first-hand experiences as a contingent commander of an infantry battalion group in Eastern Congo. The disclaimer is this is totally going to be from an Indian contingent commander's perspective. However, I have tried to gather certain issues which are critical to the mission mandate and to operational readiness and being able to do your task. I served in MONUSCO from 2012 to 14 as the logistics staff officer of the Indian Brigade, and then again as a contingent commander from 15 to 16. This deployment was in the midst of the M23 crisis, a movement which was started by a rebel faction of the National Army, which led to large-scale operations and a major upheaval in the UN structure deployed in the mission. I mean, we saw complete west to east movement of the force headquarters and a total upheaval. It is important for me to give you all this background of what was happening in Congo during that period to be able to correlate my examples. Basically, the mission was high octane, high visibility, and had been going on since the year 2000 under the UNSCR Resolution 1258 as a Chapter 7 mission. The region, ladies and gentlemen, bears the baggage of the Rwandan genocide of 1994, where more than 800,000 people were slaughtered in the Hutu-Tutsi clashes that ensued after the assassination of the Rwandan president. Today, I have been tasked with establishing a linkage between culture, societal values, military ethos, and peacekeeping. In a complex mission like MONUSCO, where more than 51 countries had contributed troops at that moment, military as well as police, culture and values are bound to be varied and diverse. So does this diversity really impinge on efficiency of the mission mandate? Do differing military ethos pose challenges for soldiers in effective peacekeeping? If so, are there any means to bridge these differences? These are the questions I shall attempt to dwell upon. The previous two panelists have lucidly covered the subject from the military and academic perspective. The kind of statistics and on-ground research by RUFA are certain issues which will emerge here in those examples. They may not be very specific examples, but they do convey the message. So I'm going to give you an on-ground point of view. Let me start by stating a fact. Culture, societal norms, and ethos are the drivers of any and every society or civilization. When this is viewed in the context of militaries, the influence is even more profound. Patriotism, discipline, procedures, drills are so interwoven in the fiber of a military man that they would probably not even realize what they are doing as muscle memory is actually an outcome of thousands of years of cultural baggage, social practices, traditions, and military ethos, which have manifested in attitudes, aspirations, and habit. Back in MONUSCO, apart from the Indian brigade, there was a Pakistani brigade in the south and a Bangladeshi brigade in the north. We had the Uruguayans, the Guatemalans, Egyptians, Ukrainians, the Chinese, and the newly formed Force Intervention Brigade, which came about in 2015, which was composed of 3 African partners, that is primarily Malawi, Tanzania, and South Africa. So this was an extremely complex mission with multiple armed groups, a fully armed breakaway faction of the Congolese regular army, and a multinational mission with immense diversity. If I had to identify a pattern, one could distinctly segregate them into 5 categories: the Latin Americans, the Asians, Africans, people from the Middle East, and the Europeans. What I deduced after observing the behavior and actions of all peacekeepers of all countries was that their actions are governed by their culture, religion, training, military ethos, and ladies and gentlemen, last but not the least, the national agenda. However, the fulcrum or center of gravity of any peacekeeping mission is the local population of the host country. This is the cornerstone for success of any military operation. Our own operational experiences back in India are replete with examples of how taking the population along has yielded disproportionate results, and mind you, also vice versa. So how these things have backfired if the population was not with us. So how does it happen? Let's take the simple example of prayers on all Tuesdays. Colloquially, the fixture has been come about to be called the religious parade or the Mandir parade in the Indian lingo, where personnel of all religion get together to pray and pay their obeisance to God as per their belief. This they follow without even realizing the deep-rooted background dating thousands of years. Similarly, there are numerous examples of infusion of culture and society into our military, which is actually a cross-section of the society that we stay in. It is safe to assume that this would be the case even with other armies across the world. For a military man serving in a multinational environment abroad, the difference in culture and ethos is distinct. If not an impediment, these differing cultural norms and societal encumbrances often create dilemmas and confusion in the minds of soldiers and pose challenges for junior leaders as well as functional leadership up to contingent commanders. So during the course of my talk, I shall endeavor to touch upon these conflict areas and areas of convergence which military personnel encounter when deployed overseas for UN peacekeeping missions. With short tenures of 6 months in case of India to up to a year, it is difficult to assume that we can find foolproof remedial measures to overcome these challenges. However, focused education on this subject and a mature leadership can certainly ameliorate these challenges that are faced in operations. I shall talk about the dynamics of interplay of culture, society, and ethos by examples, as only theoretical references may be difficult for me to correlate. I'll start with one major concept, that is the use of minimum force. The primary mandate of peacekeepers in MONUSCO was to support the National Army, the FARDC, protect civilians, prevent sexual abuse, gender-based violence, and restore normalcy through public outreach, civic projects, development projects, etc. The FIB or the Force Intervention Brigade was mandated to use force against armed groups in carrying out the assigned task. India as a military, we have to agree, has matured over the years by virtue of its operational experiences back home, where it has to deal with a plethora of situations from external aggression, counterinsurgency, IS duties, and disaster relief. All in all, the experience has paid off and reflected in our record in UN peacekeeping over the last 7 decades. Our experience in Northeast India and J&K, we have always adopted a very mature approach to peacekeeping operations. We are sanguine and we are aware of the turbulence and hardships caused to the locals during conduct of such sub-conventional operations, and have always mitigated or tried to mitigate by our principle of iron fist in the velvet glove. So all operations which we conducted were preceded by mitigation of their hardships, providing food, obtaining no objection and no damage certificates, and all possible support was provided to the villagers at all times, and specifically during conduct of these search operations or protection of civilians, or going into an IDP camp and providing support. More than adequate weightage was given to safety of civilians and prevention of collateral damage. So whenever an option would exist between use of heavy caliber weapons versus minimum force, or even display of our bigger equipment and weapons, the latter was adopted. This template of ours of use of minimum force, when we put it into UN peacekeeping operations, it yielded excellent results. This empathetic approach of taking the local population along, that built a sense of trust and security, which is an encouraging trend in achievement of the overall aim of restoration of normalcy. Moving on to another facet of sub-conventional armed conflict was people-friendly operations. I found that we, as a contingent and Indians, had a compassion and empathy sort of ingrained in our DNA. So when it came to men in uniform, that hard outer, soft, thinking and empathetic soldier was a healthy mix. This by no means is an impediment to our professional acumen, our courage, our spirit, or our dedication to the mandate. Probably because our military ethos in this regard have been formed and matured over the last 4 or 5 decades. So winning hearts and minds, as we call it, the acronym is WAM, or people-friendly operations and Operation Sadbhavna, are certain examples of the thought process of the organization which manifested into actions on ground. I'll give you an example. We were deployed in the summer of 2015 in a place called Sake. So this region was wary with those prolonged operations and armed group clashes, humanitarian crisis, IDPs. Basically, misery and poverty was in abundance. So this UN has an institutionalized system in its folds called the CIMIC, or a civil military cooperation. One of the charters of this organization is to provide support to local population in more ways than one. This is a long process involving proposals, approval, allocation of funds, and finally the execution of the project in line with the overall thought process of the mission headquarters. In my case, by the time my last flight of inducting troops arrived, my Subedar Major, or should we say my second in command, one morning during one of our routine walks around the premises of my unit, he took me on a detour. He wanted to show me some toilets that they had created for girls studying in the local school. I was impressed. He also told me that he had sent some boys to assist in resuscitating the school football ground. And he proudly said all this he did within the resources which were at his disposal in the unit. And mind you, not being told. All he said was, sir, the villagers around our camp are so poor, and this is the least we can do. We will do more once our CIMIC project is approved and funds come. So you see, this is the datum at which we operate. One could pragmatically separate emotion and profession and follow the institutionalized process of help and rehab, which has been enunciated by the UN or the other sister agencies, or then, like him, add to the cause of stability and normalcy and do your little in your own way. So this was an issue. The next issue I wanted to cover was secular fabric of the Indian military. So when we talk about culture, one of the issues which comes out is the secular fabric. Many of us in uniform have heard of the word MMG. No, I'm not referring to the medium machine gun, but this is the Mandir, Masjid and Gurudwara. That is the place of worship, Mandir for the Hindus, Masjid for the Muslims, and Gurudwara is for the followers of Sikhism, which many of our units maintain to cater to the religious belief of troops. Why I want to bring this out is some units even have a church for Christian troops. So Indian diversity is so vast that people belong to all religions and secularity is ingrained in our ethos. This diversity extends to languages, customs, castes. However, the unity in this diversity is a wonder for many who see it from the outside and for us who keep seeing it every day. This ability to absorb different cultures, languages, and religions does extend overseas on our deployments. Our troops adapt quickly and naturally. As a matter of fact, respecting the religion and customs of the host country has helped our peacekeeping missions greatly in establishing the much needed connect with the locals, which is a prerequisite for subconventional operations. Our battalion would regularly attend the Sunday mass at the local church. We would prepare lots of food and refreshments for the locals and kind of make the event festive. The main religion of Congo is Christianity, and we would join the villagers in their festivities on Christmas, New Year's, and their National Day. As also on the other side, Diwali, Dashera, which are our major festivals, our Independence Day, our Republic Day, the local village head would be invited and he would form part of our celebrations. I feel this was actually a force multiplier for our contingent. And how did it manifest into effective operations? We had a fantastic intelligence base. We were frequently informed by the villagers of brewing tensions, some fault line somewhere, location of armed groups who were transiting, some hostiles hiding somewhere, some weapons found somewhere. So this helped us immensely in planning our operations, identifying localities for civic action, development activities, and in projecting a positive image of the UN forces because we were preempted. And I would invariably hear good things about our contingent from the local population, the village elders, and also from other contingents. Talking about village elders, another unique skill which we have acquired because of our constant protracted involvement in subconventional operations is that troops on deployment to any new area, they would immediately meet up with the village elders or Gaon Budhas, as we call them colloquially. This would help the troops in establishing the much required connect and for shaping the opinion of the local population. And mind you, this interaction was not superficial and could not have been superficial because it would have been short-lived. So over a period of time, contingents in all the missions that we contributing troops, I am sure because I've spoken to CEOs, the company operating base would adopt a village or two villages or a group of villages in its area of responsibility. The base commander of the company would become a part of the village council as an advisor. He would empower the headman in carrying out his administration by providing him a JCB or a bulldozer once in a while, or repairing an animal shed or a school playground. My medical officer had a line of patients from villages, some with even livestock, cows, buffaloes, sheep, who would approach with some morbidity, some ailment or hurt practically every day. And even I, as the contingent commander, would very frequently attend these cultural events as a chief guest in my area of responsibility. Now, back home, this is a common feature, especially in the Northeast. Troops would naturally blend with the culture of in the place that they are deployed, and Congo was no exception. Moving on, from the flavor of my talk, it was very evident that the center of gravity which I'm talking about is the population of the host country. So there's one more important cultural trait which I wanted to discuss, and that is family ties and values. So one day I was in the battalion headquarters and we received information from our local source that one of the big armed group leaders wanted to surrender to the UN. So this came to us through the SRSG, the force commander, and one of our local sources also came and told us that there is something brewing and there is a chance of surrender. So the beat of operations of that armed group was in my area of responsibility, approximately 80 kilometers into the jungles, and as expected, not connected by road. So the formation headquarters gave me a helicopter, and I quickly activated a quick reaction team and a few selected boys, a language interpreter, and a UNV, a UN volunteer, whom we generally employed for outreach and liaison. So we took off in the afternoon from the battalion headquarters towards the jungle and could locate the place after hovering over that place for a couple of rounds. So it was in the thick of the jungle. Once we landed, what I witnessed was humbling. There were more than 2,000 locals. I don't know from where they emerged because from the top, nothing was visible. And they had gathered with banners, flags, drums in their traditional dresses. There was some sort of festivity. There was an electrified atmosphere. They had come to express their solidarity with their leader who was surrendering. So I could make out the leader. He approached us with a group of ladies and children. We had come up with a plan to extricate only the leader and had carried our troops and load accordingly in the helicopter. So after a brief conversation with my interpreter, some frantic movements of the hand, I was watching from a distance. The interpreter informed me that the rebel leader insisted on taking his 2 wives and 7 children along with him. So we were taken slightly off guard. We hadn't planned for this. However, with some permutation combinations and my company commander, we worked out a combination, and his entire entourage was carried after his insistence. He said he won't go otherwise. And we had to leave some of our own troops behind. I was slightly worried because it was getting dark. But however, in spite of the weather, the other contingent who was watching this happening, the Ukrainians, the helicopter pilots, the South Africans who were watching this happening, they could make out that we had left our boys behind. So you see a fusion of civilians, the locals, and the entire combination worked out. We picked up our guys in the next sortie. So here I would observe a fierce sense of belonging of the locals towards the leader, as also the leader for his kith and kin. He did not abandon or plan to abandon his villagers, in spite of the fact that his own future was uncertain. This we need to understand. No matter how rustic, how underdeveloped and downtrodden that community was, family values and bonding was in abundance. The survival instinct had not diminished his ethos or his values. So we should be cognizant of this when we deal with locals. Give them their due. understand that they too have a culture, they have values which need to be respected. Identify those red lines which cannot be breached and respect them. Only then will we be able to effectively ensure peace and inculcate trust and faith in them. Also, maybe takes years of contingent after contingent to establish a connect, whereas it will take only one incident of high-handedness, gender-based high-handedness, disrespect or abuse of their culture, which can undo years of good work of the contingent in particular and that mission in general. So apart from UN training, I feel classes on culture and tradition by all the peacekeeping training institutes of the world specific to that country should be given due importance in the orientation training of potential peacekeepers. Last point I would like to cover is the importance of a socio-cultural connect.
Kekre, how many more minutes will you take, Kekre?
Sir, 2 minutes more, sir.
Okay, done.
So the socio-cultural connect for a contingent deployed overseas is two-dimensional. One is with the population of the host country, and another is with the other contingents deployed in the mission. So in spite of the barrier of language and culture, as regards other contingents, I feel that the only way to connect and jointly operate with contingents is through one common thread of military ethos, professionalism in conduct, impeccable discipline, and a conscious effort to respect each other's values and those of the locals. A commonality of military ideology and way of functioning brings a sense of familiarity and bonding between these contingents. I often used to see these Congolese children join their hands and greet us with a namaste. Some who had stayed closer to the location with us in the Indian contingent even spoke Hindi. They would come and wish us on Holi Diwali. Our troops also picked up some Swahili words. And the same was with the other contingent. So this fusion of cultures is a pleasant experience and lays the foundation for meaningful peacekeeping operations. I conclude these learned people on the panel and the introductory remarks have given out, like Yuval Noah Harari has said, that culture has evolved after for the human species to develop the cognitive domain of thought, rationality, separating right from wrong. It's a long drawn process. So cultures, values, and ethos are evolving, and we need to work on them. And more interaction on professional social platform, joint training with the other contingents, bilateral and multilateral exercises. I think that's the only way to optimize input. And rest I leave to the good judgment of our military leaders and academia, sir, to be able to steer us through this blurred domain and pave a way forward. I'm through, sir. Thank you very much. Any questions, I'm ready to take answers.
Colonel Kekre, thank you so much. It's an excellent presentation, although you overshot by a few minutes. But listening to you, when I was so engrossed that I forgot to look at my watch. And listening to Dr. Rufa and thereafter Colonel and Dr. Kekre Sharma, and when I listened to you, as if that somehow that all three of you have maybe have a parlays indirectly. But point is that it is actually fell down logical conclusion of the, I would say, a webinar where you wanted to achieve. And you brought out the aspects from the Indian perspective, from how come, what does cultures and traditions and legacy of what you bring with us to the peacekeeping mission, how it can make a difference. And thank you so much. Now we come to this question answer session. Luckily, although we overshot the time, we have only one question for Dr. Rufa, that is requesting her comments by General Shashi Asthana. Dr. Rufa, are you there?
Of course, I've been listening all this time. Very interesting presentation.
There's a comment for you, requesting for your comment. Can you read that comment?
Yes, I've already read it. Let me just pull it up.
Yeah.
Just 1 second. I just want to make sure that I can't. Not very good with these computer things. Anyway, I can't access it right now, but if I remember it correctly, it was a very good question about the material capabilities and how to deal with that, and I think that's a very important point. I think that at least in my books, in my research, what we seem to find is a little bit of an overemphasis on material capabilities and resources. So don't get me wrong, they are important, and it's very important for peacekeepers to be properly equipped and to be to have the adequate vehicles and to be in the material conditions that allow them to do their job at their best. At the same time, however, I think that there is a lot that that UN peacekeepers can do just with better, also with better training. So I would personally be in favor, but of course, and I mean, this also though links to a broader point and a broader problem, which has to do not that much about equipment and capabilities per se, but about the differential between different countries, particularly between Western nations and non-Western nations when it comes to material capabilities. And I think this is a big issue that cannot really be dealt with at the state level, but that needs to be dealt with at the United Nations level. We can't really expect that in the United Nations mission in Mali, for instance, we have troops that are taking enormous risk, like several African peacekeeping troops, and that are deployed on the ground that are insufficiently equipped, and at the same time have a highly specialized elite units from the Swedish military that are conversely not really doing presence on the ground. I think so. There are these tensions that are there, and that they're really risking undermining the entire peacekeeping effort. And this is why towards the end of our book, and also in an upcoming event that I have at the University of London, I will be talking a little bit more and reflect a bit more about perhaps the opportunity of a United Nations peace army. I think maybe that's something that could be brought back into the table. It sounds like that it would perhaps help us to both address these material capabilities issues that Shashi Astana addressed and asked me about, but also could help us harmonize a little bit more training and preparation.
Thank you, Dr.
General Bardulai, with your permission, can I take 1 minute?
1 minute only.
Okay, just 1 minute. India in UNSC conference brought out and flagged this issue that there is a wide variation in the digital capability of various contingents, and there is a diversity there. And what we have tried and tabled in UNSC conference in this month when we were the presidents was that one is that we need to develop it. Number two, we have given this program which the DG ICWA brought out. In addition to that, we have also signed an MOU to say that we should have a UN C4 ISR capability academy. Because this is becoming important, because you can't do protection of mission unless you have credible intelligence. And to get a credible intelligence, you need to be digitally enabled. And digital enablement is in terms of resources as well as training. My 1 minute is over. Back to you.
Thank you, Shashi Asthana and Dr. Rufa. I agree with you, Shashi, that you need to have this capability of more digital intelligence. Just to give you a comment on that, again, I'll give you my answer from my experience. When Dr. Rufa will know about that, when UNIFIL got deployed, UNIFIL 2, some of the peacekeeping contingents still have got UAVs also. Some of they have got a kind of weapon system they have got, some intelligence capability they have got. I think like of this not heard also in event. They brought it along with them. But what happens, one thing to have it, and second thing is how to make use of it. It should not be seen as that you should be intrusive. And those UAVs have been kept under tarpaulin because they are not acceptable to both sides. So one thing to have it, how to use it. And apart from that, what you said that your Dr. Rufa brought out about the gear and weapon system, I'll come to about, since he brought out, I'll talk about it. But since there's no more question, I thought I will have my few words, and I will request General Goswami and General BK that if I took 2 minutes more, don't mind, because others have taken, so I think I should have to right to say that. Now, this was an excellent discussion today. I think as for myself, I have realized that what we wanted to achieve, we are going back with a lot of new information how to do it. Now, the good understanding of the concept of the diversity itself helps to understand how peacekeeping operation can be more or less effective. I'm not going to repeat what of the speakers have said, but I'm sure that all the three speakers had to say so much that they will be able to do that what they wanted to convey. When they convert their speaking notes to an article, it need not be 1,500, it could be 3,000 words, so we can get benefit about what they have said. Having said that, participation in the peacekeeping operation is by choice. So we do not have, nor even has any control on the composition of the peacekeeping missions. There is diversity. So peacekeeping mission will remain diverse, and it will vary from one mission to another mission, depending when the troops contribute. Now, one should arm with this knowledge about this impact or the tool of the diversity, how we can best use it to make the peacekeeping more effective. Next steps should be how to make use of it. One is that when the peacekeepers are made to aware, like it has come out during the intervention of the most of the speakers, that how the social behavior or diverse effect of the peacekeeping mission can impact on the outcome of the peace operations, they will be able to find out better ways to indicate to the host nation or the population the true intent. But at the same time, to expect the host population to understand and change the perception will be difficult. There are times that our true intent could be misunderstood and can be considered as intrusive. In this point, I'd like to give a small example what Dr. Rufa also touched upon about that having equipment. One of the elite unit, in their true sincerity, they went about outside carrying out the patrolling to implement the mandate. But their social behavior were not well received, maybe because they wore a complete battle gear, wearing dark glasses, weapons always ready to fire, and a helmet and your flak jackets, and driving at high speed. They simply wanted, well-meaning people want to implement the mandate. Very soon, couple of months thereafter, what happened? One of the APC came over a big ID, destroyed the completely armored personal vehicle, and the 6 peacekeepers died on the spot. So what had happened, the so-called elite unit had to mend their ways, and I'm sure that they could not do their job as effectively later after the incident as they could have done it. So it is because their social behavior or the body language were not well received. That is very important, that what we understand about that. Now, diversity is one aspect of these which can relate to effectiveness of the peacekeeping operations. But it also opens the door to many other related issues. And I want to talk about only two connected issues, which came about during our discussion. First, I am referring to strategic communication. Now, much as you would have liked to condition the peacekeeping condition to condition the behavior, is difficult. Well, Kekre also brought out, you come as a legacy and a heritage. It is because your old decades of experience, so you really actually fall into the place. But on top of that, most of the contingent, mostly the Western nation, come from the short duration of 6 months. It becomes a limiting factor. And second issue is that it results in a lack of communications, giving out wrong signals, even if it is not out of intent. And there are times the gap is exploited by a lot of armed groups to malign the peacekeeping contingent by making use of a disinformation campaign. Even this HIPPO report also brought out that the peacekeeping contingents continuously struggled to communicate to the local population about true intent, but not that simple. Now, the counter this, what happened, there is a shift in the thinking in even headquarters that about the strategic communications. So they have called out a new strategic directive on the global strategic policy on the strategic communication, how to reach out to the different stakeholders in the mission area. But as usual, there's a gap between what is in a norm given out to the UN headquarters and what can be practiced as seen in the ground. Like for instance, even if in the last conference people have brought out a lot of issues and the UN headquarters about the digitize and all, certain things we have to flag, let me tell you, because otherwise we have to do it because a matter of business. But what happens actually the operational level? Policies will be always vague, but all depends on the operational leaders and the contingent, how they relate to these policies and how to change this. Now, currently, most of the peacekeeping contingents are trying to operationalize these new communications on the strategic communications. Okay. Now, for example, to this communication, strategic communication to work well, very important to have the define the target audience, the targeted message, and who and how is going to give it. I can give you one example that in UNIFIL, long back, about 10 years back, they had used the famous, most popular stage artist, Rafiq Ali Ahmed, to carry the masses of UNIFIL to the local population. It was very well received and well acclaimed. Now, let me give you two more examples of competing examples of about a strategic communication before I come to the second issue. One that Colonel Kekre brought up, the issue of the CIMIC. Okay, and this is that what you do it. I want to bring out another competing example of the CIMIC. Very important of the why I'm giving you this, that no point how much we learn about this diversity or these horizontal or the between force commanders and the troops or the troops, unless you do not know how to make use of it. I mean, we can keep reading the books and nothing will happen. But we will not be able to make any positive contributions toward enhancing the effectiveness. This example I wanted to give you about the CIMIC is that most of the Western nations have a CIMIC team. They're experts and well-trained. But this strength is about 5 to 6 people of the contingent are over and above the UN authorized strength of the contingent. Now, these people do not participate in combat operations. The job is for the outreach program. Now, they deal with the money which additionally they get from addition to from their own countries, how to deal with them, always in touch with the population. They have been trained. Now, if there is an incident which could be as a result of behavioral problem of the contingent, it normally happens because of the wrong message. What happened? This operational team or the patrol step back. There's a CIMIC team get the information. They go there, they try to resolve the issue. They have been trained for that and resolve the issue. Maybe at the same time they say sorry. But the contingents, mostly from the global south, I can talk about these Indian contingents because like Colonel Kekre has brought out, we do not have the luxury to have induct a single additional vehicle or a man. We go by purely what even tells us. Now, so therefore what happened? The troops are multitasking. So in this contingents, if there is a similar incident of the behavioral problem, we cannot fall back to the CIMIC team. The same troops try to resolve the issues. What we had seen, that acceptance from the side of the population to hear a word about the sorry from the people who possibly must be the cause of the behavioral problem, whether it is out of intent, is better than when the word sorry is outsourced. So this is what I would say that competing example of CIMIC, and it comes again culture and trade culture and tradition. Second example, communications, strategic communication. Again, I will quote an example. There are many more examples like that. I'm sure all of you are aware of them. I recall one colonel level officer in UNIFIL. Later, he became the force commander and head the mission of the UNDOF. He retired now. Once he was traveling in Lebanon from sector east to sector west. And he used to travel all by himself, a senior level officer, along with his driver. Halfway during his journey, suddenly he was overtaken by a speeding Lebanese vehicle with 5 to 6 Lebanese young boys. And when they crossed him, they made gestures to him. They were not obscene nor offensive gestures. they're telling him some gestures as if they were telling him, hey, please race with us, compete with us. Now, this colonel was not provoked. He kept driving his own speed. After 10 minutes, he finds the same vehicle waiting for him. And the moment he crosses them, again the vehicle overtakes him, again gestures at him. So this game continued for about half an hour, 3-4 times. But this colonel did not get provoked. He used to wave at them, keep waiting, and keep driving at his own speed. Finally, he came across to a point. He again came across the same vehicle, but this time vehicle has been parked on the roadside, engine switched off. And this time when he crossed, the gesturing was different. The Lebanese were youth. They started waving to him with a smile and gesturing him that they move on. So it appears that they felt, they always, my takeaway from this is that they were initially telling him games people are playing, this strategic communication. Look, this is our country, this we have the right, race with us. He did not race with them. So when he did not race with them, they took it that, well, that man has accepted defeat, or they have given us the respect and they have accepted it that this is my land, this is my country. So they're very happy. So let that officer pass. So that otherwise they're not going to listen to the foreigners. Now, coming to the next example is that it brings me to another aspect is that to Indians, this, of course, these things come naturally. Not that because I am Indian, because I have seen about many countries. Now, different social behavior that we have observed have their own strengths and weaknesses. Like it brought out by almost all the speakers, it has got more of a heritage than less of a baggage. But point is that now peacekeeping contingents, when they participate in peacekeeping operation outside, they are military contingents, but they participate with a difference that with a UN mandate in a foreign country. All contingents are all like military teams, military units. They are also led by a force commander, who is a uniformed man, and head of the mission is a civilian diplomat, career diplomat, most probably, could be politician also. Now, by participation in the peacekeeping operation by choice. Therefore, one, the diversity will remain, and the command and control setup which is there, even also has got its own command and control setups and the laid down policies. And mostly, barring for 2 missions, where I think UNIFIL and UNDAP could be one more missions, the force commander is a double-hatted. He is also head of the mission and the force commander. Most of the mission and the force commander and the civilian head of SRSG. And both of them, they derive the power or authority from the Secretary General based on the UN Charter, the delegated authority. But it's not simple as that, because this command and control system in UN is not like other military force in their own countries. These all peacekeepers contingents, and including the civilian employees, while they would love or want to follow the policy guidelines of the command and control of UN, but generally there is a general disliking for the word command and control. Therefore, what happened is that the leadership and decision making become in a peacekeeping mission very complex and complicated, and it boils down to it's a matter of coordination and cooperation and managerial issues. Therefore, then how do you, if you're equipped in always, gainfully employ these? This all depends, and the head of the missions or the senior mission leaders, they can do that probably or possibly if they were aware of this fact that what does diversity means, what the cultures and traditions mean, and they want to strike a rapport. That's, I would say, Rufa's word, reducing the distance between the peacekeepers and the force commanders. Then they'll be able to understand the nuances of the complication of the diversity and to gain full implement or use of this strength of the diversity of the force composition itself. Now, this apart, since we're talking about the leadership, that I will also touch upon one more subject about leadership quality itself. Like another issue I want to begin with that Dr. Rufa also brought out that the force commander or the mission leader, is he a UN force commander or a national contingent commander? Yes, there is a problem because of command and control. More often than not, I have seen if he's a mature man, he will have to rely more on his own contingents. I have seen. Examples are many. One latest example I can give it is UNIFIL is there. I have seen, but one of the I think couple of years, I mean, 2000, about almost two decades, almost close to 2 decades, 2000. Sierra Leone, last time we had a seminar on hostage taking, when the biggest operation took place, I think after the no such big operation took place, there is Operation Kekre to rescue the hostess from this RUF rebels. The big operational launch, I think General Jetli, then force commander, had to rely on everyone, but mostly the most crucial task he had to give it to the Indian peacekeepers. You like it or not, this kind of puzzling or jugglery one has to do it if you want to finally achieve the result. But also apart from that, that depends on the personal leadership quality of the force commanders also. Now, like I said that in the integrated mission, the SRSG is also head of the mission. He's also expected to coordinate not only within the mission, but outside the missions also. But he has to navigate in a very uncharted waters and operate between conflicting parameters. That is that following the norms of the UN, like the principles of peacekeeping at the delivering account. Now, what happens, and the senior leaders, they interpret the mandate according to their own understanding, at times according their own understanding, but intentionally they interpret the mission depending on their calculation of what will be the gain or loss or the prestige thereof after taking a crucial decision. Many of the senior leaders, when they have calculated the decision, they calculated the loss. If that should the decision they take be counterproductive, they shy away from taking very, very crucial decision. There are n number of examples in the history of peacekeeping operation. One I can quote immediately: the Bosnia, what had happened when Bosnian Serbs took 50 Dutch peacekeepers as hostages, and right in front of them, when a lot of innocent civilians were killed, in spite of having the resources at hand, both the force commander, that is Jan Janvier, and the Yasushi Akasi, as the head of the mission, he was there before UNTAC, they decided not to use the force. They, of course, justified that if they use force, there could be more retribution on Bosnian Serbs. So they thought that maybe, according to my reading, it is better to sacrifice the 50 peacekeepers, not the sacrifice means killing. Let them take it hostage, we'll save the city. But point is that to them, the Bosnian Serbs, the Bosnian Muslims, the peacekeeping missions have failed. So they did not do it. They came in the list of, they included the list of ineffective leaders. Second is that effective leader, I want to say, similar time, around the same time, the Rwanda, what had happened? The General Dallaire, he was not getting along well with the SRSG head of the mission at all. He had clear-cut instruction not to intervene. Yet, purely on humanitarian ground, thousands of handful of peacekeepers, willing peacekeepers, he went out of the way along with staff officers, and he risked their and his own lives and saved a lot of innocent Rwandan civilians. Otherwise, I think the genocide figure of 800,000 would have gone much more. While we talk of Rwanda as a failed mission, we also should talk about what effective leader means. Later in time frame, of course, in Haiti, we know about the 2005 when the mission was almost going out of the hand, when the forces of the government forces is actually involved in a lot of crimes and killing people, innocent people and all. Ultimately, the UN peacekeeping operations, along with the French force, had to use force, use a heavy force, and to forcefully enter the palace and arrest the president. In 2011, similar incident was taken place Cote d'Ivoire, when they had used force, about 20 or thousands of ammunition they have used, kind of grenades and indirect fire and direct firing weapons they use. They have finally decided to disable the gang and, of course, kill the gang leader, whose name is, I think, I think Emmanuel Reid or something like that. That is happened in Haiti, sorry. And Cote d'Ivoire was, the president was arrested. Now, this is the examples of some of the leaders who could be listed because they calculated the loss, they decided not to take any action. There are many more leadership examples. And some of the leaders, they have taken the extra mile to, and personal risk also, cost of the carrier maybe, to save innocent human beings. Finally, I think conclude, it brings me to another point which I like to flag, that it's another key issue that how this, when you are aware of this, the mission diversity complications, with that, what are the implications of the effective strategic communications and how leadership can contribute? How do the peacekeepers, when it comes to implementing the core objective of the peacekeeping, or that is saving the population, protection of the civilians? Now, this I do not want to discuss now, because this is a subject by itself and a very important subject. I understand that, and I know that USI is going to take up this issue 2-3 months, as I think we'll be learning a lot. With this, I come to my point, and I think 1 minute, or we may have still, otherwise I think it is no question. I think I can see in the listing. What I will do, I request Director USI for closing remark, General B.K. Sharma. As you all know that he has become a common face now. He's had a distinguished career, both in command and staff assignment. He has served as a military observer, and he was also defense advisor in one of the Central Asian countries. And post-retirement, he joined USI, and he was the deputy director of the strategic studies and simulations. And his areas of expertise, of course, is strategic gaming, simulation, and of course exercises, and strategic need assessment. And soon after he took over the range of USI, I think because of him, USI got a new lease of life in the field of peacekeeping. He has given open-handed, he reached out to everyone, and his simple requirement is that people must know that what USI can contribute. And with this, I request General BK for your closing remark. Thank you.
Thank you, General Bardoloy, for those kind words. I think it's been a very fascinating session today, and my special thanks to Mrs. Singh for having very patiently sat through the whole proceedings, and also my thanks to General Goswami and Bardoloy and our Director Challenges Forum. Then we have, the other speakers, particularly Professor Rufa and my colleagues from the Army, Colonel K.K. Sharma and Colonel Kekre. Whatever I have heard here, it has reinforced my own observations when I served with the UN as a military observer in Onuka. That was a mission in Central America, wherein we were, among other things, involved in the disarming and demobilization of Contras. And it was a very simple yet very complex mission, because Honduras was being used by Americans to supply Contras and all kind of weapons, and subsequently Sandinistas came to power, and there are a host of countries, about 12 countries were there in that mission. And this mission expanded to about 5 mission countries. And then there were large number of agencies which were involved in the rehabilitation of Contras in the mainstream of Nicaragua. So that's an experience by itself which we can easily apply to Afghanistan in times to come. But what stood out very clearly from the presentation today about the diversity at different levels, the cultural diversity, the diversity of the way we operate, or DNAs of different countries. I don't want to talk about that. I think this was very, very invigorating and very, very stimulating experience. Now, what I intend to propose that since USI has a very nice partnership with ICWA, which is a very, very reputed think tank, we also have connectivity with Challenges Forum, NUPI, IPON. We've also been consulted very widely by Huda panel when these UN reforms were being undertaken. And within USI, we have very rich faculty. Most of us have been in the UN missions. Then there are other force commanders who are associated with us in their capacity as our life members. I think this kind of resource and this kind of experience is very, very rare to find. You see, Mrs. Vijay herself, she has been at New York and she's heading one of the prestigious institutions. So it's high time that we put our heads together and we provide a new lease of life to this whole UN thinking and UN policy and doctrinal level. While our Center for UN Peacekeeping is most sought after center regionally and globally, but they're mostly involved in the capacity building. Where I find a gap where the USI and ICWA together with other partner countries can come in is at the policy and doctrinal level. And at the policy and doctrinal level, you know, the very character and the nature of UN peacekeeping operations has undergone a dramatic change. Today, you're operating in the gray zone environment in the multi-domain. There are no clear-cut, these friends and foes, and you have a mission area where the two contestants, they invite you and then you go and you do the peacekeeping. It's far more characterized with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. There are state actors, there are state-sponsored non-state actors, there are non-state actors, there are crime cartels, a whole lot of those things. So who is looking at all these future challenges? And then coupled with that, as an equally important thing is the technology. Technology has become an enabler. Today, you can't work with old methods. And this factor has come out very clearly. Even General Asthana raised this. And we were contributing to ICWA, that paper which has been presented at the United Nations Security Council. US also was consulted by ICWA. Together with this, I think another challenge we need to look at, it is not peacekeeping anymore. I think peacekeeping is a very, very narrow concept. Today, you have to look at peace building. And why I say peace building, you look at what happened in Syria and Iraq. While you may have dispersed Daesh, or what you call as an Islamic State of Khorasan province, but unless you rebuild that country, that ravaged conflict zone, people will go back to those dark ages. And same is the state today in Afghanistan. Unless UN takes a leading role and the whole international effort is channelized to the aegis of UN, other countries will keep doing their proxy games and what we call the great game. So UN has a great scope in the peace building, even in Afghanistan. And that is where I think we should put our heads together. And together with maybe CU and PK, we should be actually looking at what is likely to happen. Carry out a 360-degree diagnostic assessments of some of these conflict zones. Look at certain flashpoints, inflection points, triggers, and then have some kind of a strategic responses worked out to preempt or effectively, intervene under the aegis of responsibility to protect than actually doing the firefighting, which has become the norm with the UN peacekeeping operations together. And by then, a lot of harm has already been done. To that extent, I will offer to Directors CU and PK here that please do involve ICWA and USI in running certain scenario-based tabletop exercises in which USI has an experience of about last 10 years. We've been doing it for the National Defense College. He himself is a higher command graduate. We've been doing it there. So we would like to do that. And then we would perhaps be in a much better position to provide more focused policy recommendations to Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Defense, and take this further to the United Nations Security Council and be a voice of reason in any future UN reforms. We also are going to put these monographs together after every episode, and towards the end, hopefully, we will convert this into a book, and maybe this book can be then introduced as one of the reading materials at different UN peacekeeping centers. And then if we start synthesizing the experiences and the lessons learned in different mission areas, that could yet become another volume which could be introduced as part of the syllabus in different regional peacekeeping centers and give it a wider circulation to those units which are involved in the UN peacekeeping. So with these words, I thank all of you once again, and we look forward to another exciting session in times to come. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us, and I'm personally looking forward to meet you, whether at your place or at the USI. So we look forward. Thank you, Jan Bardolai and Jan Goswami.